Dneska se podíváme na vynikající zpracované video od New Money, který dělá výborný research. Video nám ukáže, jak zjistit, co nakupují a prodávají velcí investoři a dneska konkrétně, co dělal ve druhém čtvrtletí tohohle roku Warren Buffett, nejlepší investor na světě. Proto nás asi zajímá, co dělá v tuhle dobu, kdy prostě všichni panikaří. Jdem se na to podívat.
Well, as of the time of recording, we've now ticked 45 days past the end of Q2, and that means the 13F filings are out. So these are regulatory filings that portfolio managers with at least 100 million in assets under management must submit to the SEC every quarter. And what it does is it discloses their equity portfolios. So AKA, their stock picks become public knowledge. Obviously, this is an incredible bonus for us everyday investors because we get to see what the smart money is buying and selling.
Takže tady vidíte už informaci, že je to trošku zpožděný, oni ten formulář dávají později, než to vlastně udělali, takže vy to uvidíte jakoby zpětně. Není to hned, že by vám Warren Buffett posílal stock picky, že teďka jsem něco koupil, tak hnedka to víš. Takže člověk to musí brát s tím časovým zpožděním. Je to teda formulář 13F, který si můžete jednoduše vygooglit na tu oficiální stránku, anebo existuje i dobrá stránka, myslím, že se jmenuje whalewisdom.com, kde to máte krásně zpřehledně od těch největších všech investorů a můžete se na to mrknout.
So today, starting off 13F season, we're going to look at the smartest of the smart money, Mr. Warren Buffett, the Oracle of Omaha, literally the best investor the world has ever seen. So let's discuss everything Warren Buffett has been buying and selling in Q2 of 2022, and thus what he's thinking about the markets right now. So for those that don't know, Warren Buffett makes investments not through his own name, but through his company, which is Berkshire Hathaway. So technically, we're looking at Berkshire in this video, and that's an important distinction, which we'll discuss in a second. But let's firstly start with their cash pile. So Warren Buffett has been criticized quite a lot in recent years for not deploying his cash into the market as it just powered forward. But of course, that has all changed this year. At the end of last year, Berkshire's cash pile was a whopping 143.85 billion. However, at the end of Q1, that was down to 102.69 billion.
Jde vidět, že to docela trefuje. Tady měl hodně keše na konci 2021, kdy vlastně jsme šli k tomu topu, pak to crashlo na ten nový rok a jde vidět, že začal kupovat dipy. Warren, dobrý časovač, člověče.
So that was obviously the big news of last quarter that he sunk about 40 billion into the market. But now, at the close of Q2 2022, we can see that his buying spree did not really continue into April, May and June. He now holds 101.34 billion on the sidelines, so he sits in roughly 1/3 cash with 2/3 invested. So still a lot of dough that Buffett could potentially invest into the market, even considering that we know about 30 billion of that is reserved as an emergency fund for the insurance business.
V druhém čtvrtletí jde vidět, že zas tak moc nenakupoval, protože si taky dává asi rezervu na to, kdyby se to celé úplně zhroutilo a posralo, aby mu zbylo ještě hodně cache a mohl kupovat úplně ty life-changing ceny. Takže. A tady taky důležité vědět u toho cash pile, že ono se říká hodně často, že Warren Buffett drží hodně peněz, ale on tam opravdu má, tady jde vidět 30 miliard z toho, on musí držet kvůli pojišťovnictví jako rezervu, on musí to mít v tom cache, jo? Takže to ostatní je jakoby cash, který má připravený na investice.
So that's the cash position, and now with that out the way, let's move on to the stock portfolio. What has Berkshire been buying and selling? Before we do the big reveal, it is worth noting that for the rest of this video, we will be focusing in on the top 10 holdings, and there's a good reason for that. The reason is because Warren Buffett is not the only person who makes investments under the Berkshire name. There's also Todd Combs and Ted Weschler. And in Buffett's most recent letter to Berkshire shareholders, he did note that combined, they managed 34 billion as at the end of 2021. What does this mean? Well, it means that a lot of the smaller positions in the 47 stock Berkshire portfolio aren't actually Buffett. Thus, for this video, we'll focus on the bigger holdings. With that said, here is the portfolio in its entirety. Starting at the top, this quarter, Berkshire added to Apple.
Warren se přidal Apple. Já myslím, že to bylo v období, kdy Michael Burry dal ten velký short na Apple, ne? Nedával tady Michael Burry short na Apple a Warren si trošku ještě přikoupil, OK. Když si kupujete Berkshire Hathaway, tak jste hodně jako v Apple, protože 40% celého portfolia je Apple. Tolik k diverzifikaci. Když máte v něčem velikou conviction, tak tam máte prostě tolik procent. To Warren měl nějakou takovou hlášku, že diverzifikace je pro, nechci to říct, jak to řekl on, pro idioty, jo, protože To znamená, že když máte zdiversifikováno úplně moc, až extrémně, to tak znamená, že ničemu nerozumíte moc, že radši se bojíte. Tak jde vidět, že on, když má v něčem conviction, tak tam má klidně 40%. Sice mu to tam vyrostlo, než on by to jako koupil, ale drží to tam, neprodává, netrimuje to.
Chevron, Occidental, they reduced in US Bancorp, they added to Activision Blizzard, reduced Kroger, added to Paramount Global, reduced GM, added to Celanese, McKesson, Ally Financial and Markel, and they reduced in store capital. So interestingly, no new buys this quarter. However, a lot of positions increased in size, a few decreased, and Berkshire sold out of both Royalty Pharma and Verizon in Q2. So that's everything, but now if we zoom into just the top 10 holdings, we can see two key movements this quarter. First, Buffett added 6.35% to Activision Blizzard.
Activision Blizzard je taková sázka, taková spekulace na akvizici, kdy tam s největší pravděpodobností má nějaký jistý procenta. Pokud ta akvizice projde, on nám to ještě hezky vysvětlí, tak jdem dál.
Now, this was a very interesting talking point last quarter as Buffett actually admitted that he was not buying Activision Blizzard for the long term, rather he was making a short-term bet that Microsoft's acquisition deal would go through. Of course, in January this year, Microsoft announced it would acquire the video game developer for $69 billion or $95 per share. Normally, that would cause the share price to rise to close to $95, as if the deal goes through, all those shareholders will be bought out at $95. But the thing is, since the announcement, the share price has actually not jumped up to $95. It's in fact lingered around $80. Now, it's normal for there to be a bit of a gap there while an acquisition is pending and there's still some uncertainty. But right now, that gap is about 20%. So clearly, Buffett thinks that gap is worth the potential risk of the acquisition maybe falling through. So that's Buffett's first notable move in Q2, buying a little bit more of Activision Blizzard stock and eyeing off a quick 20% return if the deal closes.
Teď je cena akcie Activision Blizzard $78 dokonce, takže pokud se ta dohoda uzavře, což Warren Buffett tomu věří, myslím, že v lednu 2023 se má uzavřít, tak by měl Microsoft vykoupit všechny shareholdery za $95 na akci. To znamená, že opravdu tam máte víc než 20% teď teoretický gain, pokud se to uzavře. A to proč to teďka netraduje, vlastně 95 to vlastně vysvětlil, že je tam pořád to riziko, že se to nemusí uzavřít. Ale Warren Buffett věří, že jo, takže si tam bere nějakých jistých v uvozovkách 20%.
But the next major talking point in this 13F is the 16.26% addition to Occidental Petroleum and the 1.42% increase in Chevron. So Buffett has been eyeing the oil companies. We've seen a lot of shorter-term investors get into the oil space over the last year or so, as there's obviously been a major disruption to the flow of oil around the world, but normally Buffett isn't the type of guy to make short-term commodity plays, so there must be something more to the story. So let's start with Occidental Petroleum. Sitting here now in Q3 2022, we can already see that he's been buying even more Occidental right now. So at the end of Q2, Berkshire held 158 million shares, but if we look at the most recent Form 4 filed on the 8th of August, it actually shows that Buffett now owns 188 million shares, so more than 20% of the company. Plus, he also has $10 billion of Occidental preferred shares and 83.9 million warrants. So yes, Buffett bought quite a bit in Q2, but he's actually sinking more money into it right now in Q3 as well. So that's Occidental, but of course he also added 1.42% to his Chevron position. So at quarter end, Berkshire owned a total of 161.4 million Chevron shares. And the reason that this is interesting, and I have to say shout out to Tom for bringing this to my attention, is because year over year, this position has gone from 0.8% of the portfolio to 7.8%, and now represents roughly the same amount of money that Buffett originally sunk into Apple. So make no mistake, this is a really big bet from Buffett, and at least the question, why is Buffett investing in oil?
Tohle video je sponzorováno investiční aplikací Trading 212, která rozdává akcie zdarma až do hodnoty 2,5 tisíce korun. Trading 212 je jedna z nejlepších investičních aplikací v Evropě, a to nejen pro začátečníky. Můžete zde velice jednoduše investovat do akcií a pro začátečníky je úplně nejvhodnější díky jejich jednoduché a velice přehledné apce. A jak dostat teda tu akci zdarma? Postup je jednoduchý. Krok 1. Stáhni si aplikaci Trading 212. Krok 2. Zaregistruj se do Invest účtu. Krok 3. Nahraj depozit minimálně 30 korun. A vzhledem k tomu, že chcete investovat, tak předpokládám, že si tam nahrajete snad i víc než 30 korun, jo, takže. Poslední krok, zde v nastavení dejte use promokód a zadejte tam kód Erik. No a jakmile akcii, kterou jste vyhráli, akceptujete, do 72 hodin pracovních ji uvidíte ve svém účtu. Pokud chcete ještě podrobnější návod, dám vám odkaz na celé video o aplikaci do popisku tohohle videa. Tak jo, přeji hodně štěstí, ať vyhrajete tu nejlepší, jako například tihle. A teď už jdeme zpátky na video.
Well, he hasn't come out and specifically stated his reasoning, but again, I have to give a huge shout out to Tom, who found a great article detailing all of Buffett's quotes on oil over time. So I want to read a few and make a bit of an educated guess as to what Buffett thinks on his investments in oil. So firstly, he said in 2020, when you buy into a huge oil production company, how it works out is going to depend on the price of oil to a great extent. It's not going to be your geological home runs or super mistakes or anything like that. It is an investment that depends on the price of oil. So obviously oil companies' profitability is determined on the price of oil, but Buffett really doesn't make commodity bets.
To se taky divím, protože on opravdu jede dlouhodobý strategie a teďka to vypadá, kdyby si sázel to, co si tady vlastně všichni sázeli na tu ropu v tomhle období.
He said himself in 2015, "We have not distinguished ourselves at all in the oil and gas field, although we've made a little money. We will not be buying very often oil and gas stocks, but we probably haven't bought the last one." Well, he was certainly right about that last bit. So, okay then, well, why is Buffett now interested in oil stocks? It sounds like he's not particularly interested from those first couple of quotes. Well, listen to this quote from back in 2007. "If we're in an oil stock, it's because we think it offers a lot of value at this price, but does not mean that we think the price of oil is going up. If we thought the price of oil was going up, we could just buy oil futures, which we actually did once."
Takže v tomhle citátu říká, že to neznamená, když si tam vzal pozici, že si myslí, že cena ropy poroste, takže jako nespekuluju, ale asi pravděpodobně si zase zvaluoval tu společnost a zjistil, že je to prostě dobrý deal, prostě za tu cenu, za kterou to koupil, se to prostě vyplatí, že mu to vrátí tu hodnotu. Takže vlastně to, co dělá celou dobu Warren Buffett, hledá hodnoty v těch firmách.
So Buffett admits he's not in the game of making commodity predictions, but he can spot a deal when it comes across his desk. And while I don't believe Buffett sees enormous organic growth from these oil names in the future, I think what he does see is juicy shareholder returns. For example, regarding the transcript of the Occidental Petroleum Q1 earnings call, Buffett said, "I read every word and said, this is exactly what I would be doing. She's running the company the right way," referring to the CEO, Vicky Hollop. And what do you know, when you open Occidental's Q1 earnings release, the first line says in Q1 they announced a new shareholder return framework and additional debt reduction targets. So buybacks and dividends both occurring at both of these companies.
Buybacky a dividendy to má Warren velice rád.
Is the big story of Berkshire's 13F filing this time around, buying up the oil companies. They also slightly added to their Apple position, which is their biggest holding after it dipped in Q2, which is interesting as it kind of shows what Buffett thinks fair value is, somewhere around the $130, $150 range.
To je taky chytrý, že když vidíte, že on si tu pozici trošku zvýšil za nějakou cenu, tak opravdu za tu cenu si myslí, že kupuje dobrý deal, že jo. Takže vy se pak můžete do těch filings podívat a podívat se, jak to má v hlavě naceněný Warren Buffett. Takže jestli on tam má 130 až 150 za Apple, kolik stojí teď Apple? Apple je teď 163, takže on už je v plusu teďka na tom. Zase. No spousta lidí tvrdí, že Apple je předražený strašně a že strašně crashne, ale Warren doplňoval pozici, tak člověče, komu věřit, že? Ale samozřejmě Apple je vynikající společnost a já ji mám ve svém portfoliu taky a vždycky taky využívám, prostě když se dostane na nějaký lepší ceny, tak si taky vždycky trošku přikoupím.
And then the last thing to note in the top 10 is a 5% reduction in US Bancorp. However, I really don't think there's anything to talk about there. But anyway guys, that is it for Buffett's big moves.
Ještě jedna zajímavá informace podle mě, asi ta nejzajímavější je, že Warren Buffett neprodal celé své portfolio. Tak jak Michael Burry nebo prostě shorteři a lidi, co předpovídají konec světa. Warren Buffett neprodal celé své portfolio, jo? Využívá situace na trhu a hledá díly, tak jako vždycky. To bylo pro dnešek všechno. Doufám, že se vám to líbilo, že jste se z toho něco naučili. Nezapomeňte si vyzvednout tu akci zdarma až do hodnoty 2,5 korun. Když zadáte kód Erik, Trading 212, dávám link v popisku videa a uvidíme se zase někdy příště. Doufám, že se vám to líbí, že to tam teďka buším takhle ty videa. Doufám, že se vám to líbí. Tak mějte se hezky, ahoj.